Welcome into another Ferrario Face-Off here at Claibs Online. I'm Alex Ferrario, along with my good buddy Mike Claiborne, and plenty to talk about because Claibs, I would imagine a lot of Blues fans right now are smacking that panic button as hard as they can as the Blues are in the midst of a five-game losing streak after the most recent loss to the LA Kings, which was not a good-looking loss for the Blues as they found themselves down by 3 goals in the first period. Claves, before we dive deep into it, just give me your overview of this team at the midway point because they played game number 29 on Wednesday night.
Lacking, one word, lacking. Lacking intensity, lacking focus, lacking unity. There's a lot of things that this team isn't doing that winning teams do. They assume that they can just show up and throw their sticks and gloves on the ice and beat somebody. And maybe it's the schedule and how it works, but everybody's dealing with the same thing. But I just think that there's a lack of intensity and focus right now. You're down 3-0 before you can say what happened, and nothing really changed after that. And you and I've talked about this before. The intensity isn't there. You bring in Kyle Clifford to make sure people don't run some of your good players. But that doesn't mean Kyle Clifford has to go out and fight every night. That means that you've got a little bit more toughness, and that means that other guys can step up. When you get a guy running Torrey Krug, now granted, Krug probably took exception because the guy went right, tried to split him in half, and nothing happened after that. I mean, the Blues didn't even have 8 body checks after that. And that's my issue. I'm not advocating that, all right, let's go out here and fight every other shift. What's wrong with landing on somebody? And there just isn't the chemistry that this hockey team needs. And I know we're using the excuse, we'll wait until we get the other guys back. Well, you know what? We can't wait for the other guys. You have to worry about the now, not the future. And it's really disappointing. And it starts from center ice all the way back to the goalie. And I'm talking about the forwards all the way back to the goalie. No one is playing with any real intensity that would warrant them being respected. And I think the word is going to get around the league. Hey, you know what? The Blues aren't anything close to what they used to be. So who cares what they do? When they get behind, there's no come from behind effort.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Chief pulls a goalie, trying to get some magic going. And of course they get scored upon, but there's no intensity. There's no desire. There's nobody angry in what's going on. And I think that's a problem. And it's the label. It's the face of what's called a 500 hockey team.
If I had to use one word, Claves, to follow up kind of what yours was, mine would be insecurity. And
Yeah.
I've seen this a lot from this team. Doug Armstrong made the moves in the offseason to be a more mobile team from the back end. Torrey Krug's brought in. Justin Falk gets more of a advanced role with no Petrangelo and no Bouwmeester. So this team should be excellent at exiting their zone and moving the puck up the ice, playing Craig Berube's system, right? North-South hockey. For whatever reason it may be, and Curb said this on the broadcast last night, the Blues look lost when they have the puck in their own zone. And part of me feels like it's insecurity and lack of confidence in their game because when they have the puck on their stick, I'll give you a great example. Last night, Torrey Krug has the puck on his stick behind the Blues net on that power play, has the opportunity to just skate it up out of the zone and clear it, but instead he tries to make the extra pass to Justin Falk behind him, which results in a turnover and the power play goal. I don't know what happened between last year and this year, but to me, there seems to be a lack of confidence on this team when they have the puck in their own zone.
That's a great point you make. And it's not that hard. I mean, the Blues used to be a 1-pass, maybe 2-pass defense core in their own end. And they were going forward. They weren't going D to D. They were going D to forward. Now that's not the case. They're very apprehensive. And I used to we talked about Justin Falk being the master of the 5-foot pass. Well, they
Yeah.
don't even do that anymore. They're not skating with their heads up. They're not looking at guys in the neutral zone who are looking to break out. And it's evident. And teams now have decided, you know what, we're going to forecheck or we're going to really clog up the neutral zone. So we're going to make them skate it out or we're going to make them turn it over instead of having guys moving. And I'm going to pin this on the forwards more than I'm going to pin it on the D. The forwards stand around too much. There's no flow. When you don't have the puck, you should still be skating. And they're not. They're standing still, or they don't have enough momentum to really break out of their own end. And it shows. So the defenseman has to wait, and he's looking around, and nobody's moving. They're not hitting anybody on the fly. And therefore, the other team has a chance to step up, take 2 more steps in toward them to limit their passing zone. And hence, they make a bad turnover, or they don't use the boards, or they throw it in the middle of the ice. And, when you throw it in the middle of the ice, bad things happen. So it's a combination of what you're saying in confidence, because the D doesn't have confidence in the forwards making themselves readily available to accept the pass and go forward instead of lateral.
I hate to say it, Claibs, but if people in this team are sitting there saying, well, when we get Jaden Schwartz and Colton Parayko and Robert
Screw
Thomas.
all of that. That's not even, you know what? We're past that, because at last check, none of them were playing well when they were in the lineup.
Right.
So, and I'm not saying that I'm blaming them, but my point being, of those 3 guys, they're all important players, but there has been plenty of time for everybody to adjust to what they had. So you're telling me that these guys are so valuable. They were light years ahead of what you're putting out there now. And that's not the truth. And if that is, then that tells me that the players that you have aren't good enough to be on a quality hockey team. So which one is it?
And that's where I'm at. You can't tell me that you get those 2 back in the lineup and that is going to fix all of these issues for this Blues team, because that was the excuse when Vladimir Tarasenko was out and he returned. That was the midst of a losing streak. That was the excuse for Tyler Bozak while he was out. Losing continued on against the LA Kings. Parayko and Schwartz maybe will make things a little bit tighter, but they're not going to fix the full squad issue that's not playing the 5-man unit that Craig Berube talks about. I mean, Claibs, he said it after the game. I think it was Friday's loss against the Vegas Golden Knights.
Pick a night. He says it all the time because it's the same problem.
And the one that stuck out to me was him saying, we have guys that aren't pulling on the same rope. And the first thing that I thought of, Claibs, was the Doug Armstrong comment from when Mike Yeo was fired and Craig Berube took over, independent contractors. Now, I don't know if the Blues are on that point, because I do know, I've talked with Darren Payne, these guys are very close in the locker room, but it's not showing on the ice right now.
I hear that, and you say, well, this guy's good in the room, or they really care about each. I don't care what they do in the locker room, because you know what? They're not paid to get along. They're paid to play. And, I've seen teams where guys didn't get along, but they found a way for 60 minutes to work it out. I'm tired of the love fest that guys have, as far as, well, they really care about each other and they get along and they're great in the room. I don't care. The results don't show that makes a difference in the success of this team. It doesn't show it. And what's going to happen is they're going to get somebody traded. They're going to get somebody moved out of here, if nothing else, to bring some new energy into the room, because they've left it up to the players to figure it out. Okay. And this is where I give Craig Berube a lot of credit. He could bang his stick and he can do this and he can do that. And he probably does. But being a former player, he understands the only way this is going to get worked out, the players have to do it. These players have elected not to, or they've left it up for somebody else to do. And they're not doing it together, which goes back to the whole not pulling the rope. And so that's where we're at. And how do you fix it? I don't know. So let me ask you this question. Of the elements of this hockey team, aside from being good in the room, what do you like about it? What do you feel, as all things have gone south over the last 5 games, is there anything constant that you see that's a positive thing that they can build upon?
I don't think so. I think if I had to pick one, but this is kind of a reach for me because they've been so inconsistent, it's the depth of this team. I mean, Dakota Joshua has played very well for this Blues team. Mackenzie McEachran has played well for this team. You're starting to see guys in spurts start things up. Braden Shen has stayed consistent. O'Reilly, Perron. But that's still a reach for me because of what we just witnessed.
Yeah.
You got a goal against the LA Kings. You had a goal against the Vegas Golden Knights. I think in the last 5-game losing streak, you've maybe had one game where you've scored more than 3 goals. So as much as I can talk about the depth of this team, it's depth of this team that are third line players, not top line players that can jump up into play.
Well, it's interesting you brought up those guys, the third line and fourth line players. That's not really the problem.
Yeah.
It's the top six line, the two top lines that aren't showing any consistency. They should be getting a bulk of the ice, but they're not. They are, and they're not doing anything with it. Throw in the fact that when you look at the fact that very few guys play the body on the first two lines, it's glaring. I don't know whether the game has caught up with Jordan Kyrou or not, where he's not the same guy we saw a month ago. And I wonder about his confidence at this point. I just think that they've got some real issues that they've got to get figured out, and they got to get them figured out quick, because the last thing you want to do is get the wrong draw if you get into the playoffs, because there's some teams right now that are outplaying you. Alex, we got some sort of technical issue here. I can't hear you on this end. Still can't. Folks, I don't know what's going on, but we got a little bit of a technical issue here. We'll try and pick this up a little later, so we invite you to stick around. We appreciate you watching for now, and what we'll try and do is get this rectified and try and come back and revisit with you here. Oh, there we go.
We got it?
I got you. All right.
There we go.
I was about to sign off.
Beautiful technology for you, Claibs. That's what happens when you broadcast in a basement and you have a new baby at home.
I understand. I get it.
No, what I was going to say with you, Claibs, was it's incredible to me that we're talking about a lack of confidence with a group of guys that found the confidence with this same coaching staff. And I'll hone in on a couple of different guys. One of them being Steve Ott. He is a phenomenal communicator. You know this better than I do. He has the ability to talk to some of these younger guys and get them on board with the style that Craig Berube wants to play. But for some reason, it's just not clicking right now with this group of players.
Yeah, and again, you don't have many options at this point unless you want to move a guy. And I'm not opposed to that. I don't think there's a guy on this team that's an untouchable at the rate they're playing. Now, the issue comes into play. You got some guys from a cap standpoint may not be attractive, but you got to do something to shake this thing up. I just don't think you can continue to play and come up with the same excuses each night and feel like everybody's buying into this. So the trade deadline is just around the corner. You just never know. But, and when you look at the third and fourth line guys, they're doing what they can. And for the most part, they are who they are. With the exception of, we did find out one thing: when Barbashev was healthy, he was a spark on the top line.
Yeah.
So maybe you start juggling lines, and some of those guys start getting some prime ice and seeing what they can do with it.
I think you have to try it. Claibs, one other aspect on this Blues team I wanted to touch on with you before I get into some of the NHL teams. Defensively. Now, I'm with you. I don't blame the defensive core at all, just themselves. I blame the entire roster because I think it's the forwards. But one thing has been very noticeable these last few games: this team's getting beaten in front of their own net. I mean, I'll go back to the game against the LA Kings. Both goals, the first and the third one, came from the Blues being unable to get the puck away from the LA Kings. I mean, that first power play goal against the Kings, Claibs, the Blues had a shot go from the LA Kings into Binnington's pads, makes the save. They're unable to clear the puck with 3 guys in front of the crease. LA pulls it back, gives it to Doughty, and he takes the shot. That was going to happen when you lose Jay Bouwmeester and Alex Pietrangelo in terms of size. But I am really surprised that guys like Torrey Krug and Vince Dunn and Justin Falk are getting beaten in front of their net as much as they are.
Yeah, that's a good point you make. None of those guys are what I would deem physical players. But you don't have to be physical just to get in the way and put yourself in between the puck and the guy who's trying to score.
Yeah.
And they're not doing that, and they're getting pushed around too much. And I'm a little surprised because a guy like Scandella, uh, some of the other bigger players have to assert themselves a little bit more. And Krug wouldn't be in this league if he didn't know how to do it himself. And I know he's a little smaller than some of the other guys, but he understands positioning.
Yeah.
And this doesn't mean you got to cross-check a guy in the throat or anything, but you do have to make sure you put yourself in that position. And they're willing to give up their real estate, and that's a concern. But it goes back to my original point about the lack of physical presence the Blues have displayed, not fighting, playing the body, and not making sure you hit a guy in the fifth, knock him into the fifth row, but just make him stop, make him start, get in the way, deny him a passing lane. Little things is what I'm talking about, and they're not doing it.
Do you think it's necessary for this team, Claibs, to make a move kind of like the Cardinals did in the past, where they needed to change that locker room atmosphere, so they traded away a Joe Kelly and an Alan Craig and brought in a John Lackey, a guy who's that grizzled vet? Do you think the
Yeah.
Blues need to do that move?
Yeah, I think a Rusty Nail would be good right now.
Yeah.
And the first thing he would come in and say, "Boy, I thought you guys thought you guys just won the cup a couple of years ago.
Right.
I thought this was a Stanley Cup championship team." And just challenge them. I mean, I think it's better to have a player challenge another player than a coach. You mentioned Steve Ott, who is a very good communicator and who's going to have a job here pretty soon. He can only say so much. And if you're Ryan O'Reilly, you're the captain. I don't know how much you say. I think it's got to be somebody who doesn't have a letter on their sweater to say, "Hey, I thought we were Stanley Cup champions 2 years ago. We're not playing like it. We're playing like a team that we watching somebody else in the Stanley Cup playoffs this year."
Yeah, perfect player to do that would be a Tyler Bozak, who may not wear a letter, but he's a guy who's been around the league for a really long time and knows that it's like, guys, we are much better than this. You mentioned Ryan O'Reilly, Claves. Do you think he's doing too much out
Yes.
there and putting too much pressure on himself?
Yes. I think Ryan O'Reilly's still the best player on the team.
I agree.
But I think when you get that letter, you feel like you've got to do more. I've always felt like in this day and age, wearing a letter is more, you're just talking to the media more. You're organizing things in the dressing room, but you still have to live up to your own personal expectations as far as play is concerned. And I do think he's overdoing it, or he's trying. I don't know if I want to say he's trying too hard, but he's making an effort that puts him off of his game, I think, just a hair. But having said that, he's still the best player on the team.
Yeah, exactly. That's the part that gets me. I feel like from the personal side of it, he's doing too much. He's trying to be the savior rather than just being Ryan O'Reilly. But with that being said, he is the only player that is really out there. He, along with Braden Shen, in my opinion, are the ones that are out there playing Craig Berube's style. So, Claibs, we are talking so much about the St. Louis Blues, obviously, because things aren't great right now. But imagine being a Buffalo Sabres fan.
Woo!
I mean, you talk about everything just being thrown into the trash can and lighting it on fire. That's what Kevin Adams has done with this Buffalo Sabres team. So,
let's talk about him for a minute.
Yeah,
I don't know how much you know about his background. He was kind of a favorite son to the ownership family, where he was running their practice ring. He was running their minor league operation, the practice ring. He has no clue what he was doing as far as the general manager is concerned. And while everybody thought, well, this is a team, they got Eichel, they go out and get Taylor Hall, they got a couple other good players. Okay, a couple of injuries roll around. Taylor Hall hasn't lived up to what they hoped for. They've had a couple of other guys who haven't lived up to the expectation. And then everybody else just went totally south. Kruger was a guy that nobody was listening to anymore. And Adams probably isn't the guy. I had a conversation with someone yesterday about that organization, and basically Plugler's wife is running the team.
Oh,
okay. God. She's kind of one of the people who's taken over, and I don't know how much she knows about hockey. I mean, on the surface, it would tell you not enough, but that is maybe the most dysfunctional organization as we're talking hockey in the National Hockey League right now, where you're going to see a lot of guys ask out. It'll be interesting to see if they have a fire sale. Taylor Hall he's a pretty good player.
Yeah.
That teams would be interested in if they have the cap room. A lot of teams are so close to the cap as we speak that they're looking to dump salary compared to take on salary. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a team move a player with money and then maybe make a run at a Taylor Hall in a trade. But it's going to be, you're going to see a lot of teams trying to trade contracts compared to trying to trade players. But Buffalo is a disappointment, to say the least. I thought at the beginning of the year they were a team that might contend for a playoff spot because of the young players that they had on the team. That's not been the case.
You know, it's incredible when you look at, because they're polar opposites, Claibs. You look at Kevin Adams, who's a former NHL player, and of course he makes the general manager position for the Buffalo Sabres and doesn't have success, at least for the beginning portion. But then you look at Bill Guerin, who's been around the NHL. He's a, in my opinion, a possible hockey Hall of Famer. He's been an assistant general manager with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He takes over in Minnesota and
Cleans
immediately,
house.
yes, gets rid of players. He got rid of Mikko Koivu, who's the longtime Minnesota Wild. He's moving goaltenders. He's building the roster that he wants to build, the identity, and everyone bought into it. And look at what they're doing right now.
Yeah, they were a team that nobody thought was going to do much. And you know, Bill Guerin, I give him credit. He changed the culture. There is no excuse for the Minnesota organization not being competitive with the great hockey traditions that they have in that great state. And Bill Guerin just came in and said, you know what? This guy's been around long enough. He's a little too comfortable. This guy here should be better. It's time for the move. And maybe he'll be better somewhere else. And you know what? I think you can get away with that in the first and the last years of your tenure. Mm-hmm. Or if you win, you get a little bit more stock to hold on to. And Doug Armstrong would be a guy that if he moves somebody tomorrow, everybody would say, well, you know, he knows what he's doing.
Right.
So I tip my cap to Bill Guerin and what he's doing. And he's put the heat on some other teams who thought they were going to be playoff contenders. You better move over, because I think Minnesota is going to be a team that won't go away. And I like what they're doing.
I agree 100%. Back to Buffalo real quick, Claibs. This stat blew my mind, and this just goes to show you how bad it is there. The bottom 7 players in the National Hockey League that are minus players, so plus minus, the worst 7 players in terms of that statistic are all Buffalo Sabres players.
Who has the worst minus in the league at this point? Do you know off the top of your head?
If I'm not mistaken, it is Taylor Hall, who's like a minus 27.
Ouch.
Yes.
Ouch.
Right.
That hurts.
And especially with Taylor Hall, Claibs, this is a guy who, like, I think it's 45% of his career, he has been with a team that has earned the first overall draft pick.
Yeah, when you think about Edmonton.
And then New Jersey.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, he's a good player. He's good enough to get a coach fired because of his skill set, and you wonder how can you get to him. Right. It's never helped him to be on teams that didn't have enough good players. But I thought with Buffalo, with Eichel and a couple of other good young players that they had, they might be competitive, but that hasn't been the case. And I think they may have to start over again. Alex, this is a team that might find themselves, well, they're going to be in the lottery. Mm-hmm. And if they play their cards right, they're going to have the first pick overall again.
Then you turn into the Edmonton Oilers, where you just keep selecting first overall draft picks, but never have success with them.
Yeah. And, again, the term culture change might be in order once again. We just talked about Bill Guerin and what he did in Minnesota. I think if you're the Buffalo Sabre organization, you probably just blow up the whole thing, put in a new president, put in a new GM. Maybe you find another director of scouting, and just give it a different look. Mm-hmm. Because I think one of the other issues that comes into play here is that you're going to lose fan confidence here pretty soon. Remember, the Buffalo Bills are now the hot commodity in that neck of the woods, and they may just cross the street and stay there. Unfortunately, the same owners, the owner of both teams is the same person. So at some point, they've got to get that figured out on, are they lucky that they have good football people in charge and they let them do their job? Or are they unlucky because they want to be more hands-on and hire people that they like compared to whether they know if they can do the job or not?
Couple more minutes with my good buddy Mike Claiborne here on the Ferrario Face-Off. Claibs, another guy that we got to talk about is the return of everyone's good buddy Daryl Sutter, who takes over in Calgary. as they brought in the grizzled vet to try and turn things around. And he's had success. I mean, 4 games. I think he took his first loss on Wednesday night, but overall 3-1 as the head coach. Are we going to see another LA Kings moment with Daryl Sutter and this Calgary Flames?
Possibly, possibly. When you look at that team, you've got some good players on it. You got decent goaltending. Giordano, who's a little long in the tooth, is still a solid defenseman. You got Johnny Hockey up front, and they've got some other good young forwards. I could see that.
Yeah.
They got Lucic there, who's going to make sure that the guys don't get roughed up too much. He's got some elements, and I think the biggest key for them is Lucic is on that team, and he can tell those guys what to expect from Sutter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very important element to have, because I'm sure all these guys have heard horror stories about what kind of coach he is and this and that. Yeah, but he's got a couple, 3 rings to go along with it. Now, his style may not be everybody's comfort level, but I got news for you. It works. And for a young team with a couple of veterans sprinkled around, they might be a team that might surprise everybody before this is over with.
What's interesting, Clay, because for so long we were kind of going through this little spell in the NHL where, coaches that were, I don't want to say verbally abusive, but were very aggressive on the bench were getting pointed out by a lot of NHL players. But Daryl Sutter's always had success with that style of play with his teams.
Yeah, but his style is not of the abrasive nature where he's MFing a guy or he's doing something that's derogatory. He just challenges guys to be better.
Mm-hmm.
I look at him as a guy who is a guy who communicates with fewer words.
Yeah.
There are some guys that I'm sure he pats on the back and just says, nice job. And there are other guys that he just says, you got to be better. And,
right.
He leaves it up to the player to figure out how he can be better. Daryl Sutter could be considered a dinosaur to some, but everywhere Daryl Sutter's gone, he's made them better for a short period of time. Now, the challenge is, when does the speech and when do the motivational tactics get old?
Yeah.
So his shelf life may not be as long, but, he's perfect for a team that he first takes over. And depending on how much leeway they give him on personnel, yeah, Calgary could be a fun team to watch, and Calgary is certainly get in the postseason.
One more that's fun to watch. It's Alex Ovechkin, Claibs. I don't know if you saw this. I'm sure you did, but he takes over Phil Esposito, 6th all-time in terms of goals in the NHL. He's 178 behind Wayne Gretzky. Does he break that record at some point in his career?
No.
You don't think so?
178 is a lot. You'd have to be a 50-goal scorer for at least 3 years to be close.
Yeah.
And I just don't
see that. He's 35.
Yeah, I just don't see. Now, granted, he's in good shape. He's a physical player, but I look at teams that would probably really bear down. So I don't see him doing it. I think he'll get close, but I don't think he'll do it.
Yeah. I hope he does, but I'm with you. 35 years old.
I don't want to see him break it.
You don't want to?
No. I think Wayne Gretzky has a mark on this game. Now I'm all sound like Kennesaw Mountain Lad is not wanting Roger Maris to break Babe Ruth's record. I admire him as a great hockey player, but I think Wayne Gretzky's record is one that should remain sacred. Yeah. And I just think that in this case, Ovechkin's got have a lot of things work for him. And here's the other thing that's got to work for him. He's got to have good players around him. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's in a good situation now, but because of salary cap issues and other things that come along, maybe the guys he plays with now won't be around. Maybe their skill level drops off. What happens if Tom Wilson isn't around? There's a lot of things that go into this that I think will make this a very huge challenge for him, where he's got to score an average of over 50 goals a year just to be close. And, he's been injury-free for the most part. And that's a good thing for him too. So I just think it's still a steep mountain to climb.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point just to kind of keep a close eye on as we inch closer to that. Claibs, this is fun, buddy. I appreciate you trying to calm the paranoia right now of the St. Louis Blues that so many people have. But the Blues, they got 2 games against the San Jose Sharks. They'll play 1 against Vegas next week, and then one against the Minnesota Wild as they wrap up this road trip. And then they kick off the month of April, which is going to be a chainsaw of competition with the teams that are Vegas, Colorado, and Minnesota.
Well, and those are the teams they're going to, excuse me, teams they're going to have to beat anyway. And, when we look at San Jose, we used to think they were a pushover. There's no such thing as 2 points in the bag now. So they have to start off by beating those teams. And maybe this time next week, we're like, hey, here come the Blues. And then we'll go back and we'll look at the records of the teams they're beating. But here's the deal. If they start losing to those teams, then we got bigger issues to talk about.
Yep, 100%. And then you got Vegas and Minnesota to worry about. Claibs, this has been fun, buddy. Thank you so much, and we will talk next week.
Looking forward to it. Want to remind everybody this is brought to you by our good friends from Ameren, Illinois, Munganast Alton Toyota, and, of course, the home loan expert, Ryan Kelly. This is a great opportunity. If you're looking to buy, you can get pre-qualified and get all the house you can stand. Thanks to Ryan Kelly and the home loan expert at ryankelly.com. Check him out.
And thank you to Mike Claiborne. Once again, I'm Alex Ferrario. This has been the Ferrario Face-Off. We'll talk to you next week for more hockey and Blues talk right here at Claibs Online.